Russia secretly signed a $500 million arms deal to give Iran 2,500 missiles that American aircraft cannot reliably defeat. Read that again. Not a leaked rumor, not an analyst projection, a concluded documented transaction verified through leaked Russian government procurement files, delivering technology that tears a hole in the single greatest military advantage the United States has held for 30 years. And it happened while Washington was looking somewhere else. Let that sit in your brain for a second, because we are 10 days into an active shooting war between the United States and Iran. Operation Epic Fury launched on February 28, 2026, and the weapon at the center of this story hasn't even arrived yet. The Pentagon is already burning through interceptors at a rate that has Bloomberg, The Atlantic, and the Wall Street Journal all using the same word: shortage. The US has spent over $2.4 billion in Patriot missiles alone in the first 5 days of this war. And the weapon Russia just sold Iran is designed to make the next phase of this conflict, or the next war, entirely categorically different. Not incrementally harder, categorically different. This is the story of the 9K-33 Verba, and it's bigger than Iran. Here's what the surface coverage is giving you: a shoulder-fired missile deal, thousands of man-portable air defense systems, the kind of weapon a soldier carries on his shoulder. The mainstream framing is already appearing in think tank commentary suggesting this is unlikely to be of much use against the US military. That framing is not just wrong, it is deliberately comforting. And comfort in this context is strategic negligence. The Verba is not a Stinger knockoff. It is not a Soviet-era design with a fresh coat of paint. It is a fourth-generation man-portable air defense system. The 9K-33, built around a Seeker technology that exists nowhere else in the world at this scale, in this form, for this price point. And Russia just contracted to deliver 500 launch units and 2,500 of these missiles to Iran between 2027 and 2029. That's not a defensive supplement to an existing arsenal. That's a distributed man-portable anti-aircraft network that can be handed to proxies, moved across borders and shipping containers, and positioned inside any conflict zone Iran touches. The question you need to ask is not, can Iran use this against F-35s at 40,000 feet? The question is, what happens to every other American aircraft? And once you ask that question correctly, the answer is genuinely alarming. Here's what the 9K-33 Verba actually does. Let me translate the technical specification into plain language, because the technical is where the danger lives. Every previous generation of man-pads, the Stinger, the Eagler, the MYOG, uses a single-channel infrared seeker. It chases heat. The countermeasure is flares: burn bright, fool the seeker, save the aircraft. That countermeasure has worked reliably for decades. Every US military helicopter, every close air support aircraft, every transport flying at low altitude, they all carry flare systems. Those flare systems are the last line of defense against all previous man-pads. They work well enough. The Verba carries a trispectral seeker, 3 simultaneous tracking channels: ultraviolet, near-infrared, and mid-infrared. It is, and I want to be precise here, the only known man-portable air defense system in the world with this architecture. What that means is this: when you fire a flare, you create a heat signature in one band. The verbose seeker discriminates. It reads the spectral fingerprint of the actual engine exhaust, which produces a signature across all 3 channels simultaneously, and compares it against the flare, which burns hot in one band but not the others. The system is designed to reject the countermeasure. Russian military testing documentation describes its jamming resistance as 10 times stronger than the previous generation Igla systems it replaced. 10 times, not incrementally harder to fool. 10 times. The missile travels at up to 600 men, or Mach 1.75 at altitude. Its engagement range is 6.5 kilometers. It operates up to 4.5 kilometers in altitude. That altitude ceiling covers every helicopter in the US inventory: Apache, Black Hawk, Chinook, and every fixed-wing aircraft operating in closed air support roles. The A-10, the AC-130, certain configurations of the FA-18. An FA-18 Super Hornet costs roughly $67 million. The 9M3 and 36 missile costs at rough production estimates in the hundreds of dollars per unit. Let that asymmetry register. And here's the second layer of this. Iran is not buying 2,500 Verba missiles to defend Thrawn. Iran is buying 2,500 Verba missiles to distribute. The IRGC Quds Force has active supply chains running to Hezbollah in Lebanon, to Houthi forces in Yemen, to Shia militia networks in Iraq and Syria. The Verba is man-portable. It weighs 17 kg. It fits in the back of a truck. It requires minimal training to operate. What Moscow is selling, Thrawn, is not just an air defense capability for the Iranian state. It is a franchise weapon, one that can appear in any theater where Iran has reached. Now, let's talk about what mainstream coverage will not tell you. The deal became public because of leaked Russian government procurement documents. It was not announced, it was not negotiated in open diplomatic channels. The Financial Times broke the story in February 2026, citing internal Russian files. The Russian government did not deny it. The Iranian government did not deny it. The US response was silence. Here's what that silence actually signals. The delivery timeline 2027 to 2029 is not arbitrary. Analysts at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies immediately noted that these deliveries would arrive after any plausible short-term US military operation targeting Iran. That framing implies the current operation ends. Iran survives it in some form and then receives a weapons upgrade. The Kremlin is not gambling on Iran winning this war. The Kremlin is investing in Iran's capacity to fight the next one. But here's the detail that changes everything. 2027 to 2029 is the formal state delivery timeline. Iran's proxy networks do not operate on formal state delivery timelines. The IRGC Quds Force has moved advanced weapons, anti-tank guided missiles, ballistic missile components, drone technology through unofficial channels for decades. The question intelligence agencies are asking right now behind closed doors is how many Verba systems have already moved through informal channels. And the answer is we don't know. That absence of knowledge is not reassuring. That absence of knowledge is the threat. Zoom out, because this single arms deal connects to a structural shift in the global balance that is much larger than a missile contract. Since 2022, Russia and Iran have built what is functionally a bilateral military-industrial partnership. Iran gave Russia the Shahid 136 drone blueprints, the production technology, and thousands of finished units. At the start of the Ukraine war, Russia paid one Palmer $75 billion for the technology and 6,000 units. Russia then built a dedicated drone factory at Alabuga, an industrial complex in Tatarstan, producing Iran-designed Garand, 2 drones at scale for use in Ukraine. The technology flow then inverted. Russia began feeding upgraded components back to Iran, including its own electronic warfare systems and guidance improvements. Iranian drone debris recovered from a British RAF base in Cyprus contained elements of Russia's CRPA Kamida-M antenna. The relationship has moved past client-patron. It is now genuine co-development. Think about what that means. 2 of the 3 nations the United States has defined as primary adversaries, Russia and Iran, are now engaged in a weapons co-development relationship that uses active combat in Ukraine and the Middle East as a live testing laboratory. Every limitation Iran exposes in its current engagement with US forces is being analyzed in Moscow. Every countermeasure the Pentagon deploys today is being documented for tomorrow's design cycle. Meanwhile, the US is learning the cost of its own doctrine in real time. The Pentagon has burned through over $2.44 billion in Patriot interceptors in less than a week. Each TED missile costs $122.8 million. Lockheed Martin produces 96 of them per year. 96. Iran entered this war with over 3,000 ballistic missiles and had a documented plan identified by Israeli intelligence before the conflict began to expand. That stockpile to 8,000 missiles. The math is not hidden. Senator Mark Kelly stated it plainly. This becomes a math problem really quickly. A $20,000 Shorehead drone forces a $3.9 million Patriot Pack 3 MSE intercept. A $30,000 drone destroyed a radar installation worth $300 million, representing a $10,000 to 1 return on investment for Iran. The cost of symmetry is not a tactical problem. It is a structural collapse of the economic logic that has underwritten American air dominance since the Gulf War. This is not a new problem. It echoes with disturbing precision the dynamic the United States itself created in Afghanistan in 1986 when the CIA supplied Mujahedin fighters with FIM-92 Stinger missiles that began destroying Soviet Mi-24 heat attack helicopters. Within months, the Soviets had lost their ability to conduct low-altitude close air support. The Stinger changed the war. The lesson the United States taught the world was this: the right shoulder-fired missile in enough hands can neutralize a superpower's air advantage. Russia just applied that lesson against us. There is a pilot in the cockpit of an FA-18 Super Hornet right now, 26 years old, call signed, probably something like Hawk or Ripper, who trained for beyond visual range air combat, for dogfights, for precision strikes on hardened targets. He did not train for what happens when a man on the ground with a 17-kilo launcher fires a missile with a T-spectral seeker and no plausible countermeasure in a 3C-second engagement window. That pilot is flying low over a conflict zone because that is where close air support happens. And the Verba is a low-altitude weapon. There is a crew chief in a CH-47 Chinook moving soldiers and equipment at 500 feet altitude who is not thinking about THAAD or Patriot batteries. Those systems are pointed at ballistic missiles traveling at Mach 10. Nobody is pointing a billion-dollar interceptor at a shoulder-fired missile. You intercept those with flares, and the Verba seeker was engineered to dismiss flares. There are 12 million people in Thailand who had no vote on whether their government built 3,000 ballistic missiles and picked a fight with 2 nuclear-armed powers. There are 5 million people in the UAE, in Dubai and Abu Dhabi living within range of Iranian Shahed drone swarms, hosting American military bases at Al Afra and Al Manhad, who woke up on March 1st, 2026, wondering whether their city's air defense was going to hold. The people making the decisions that created this moment in the Kremlin, in the IRGC and the Pentagon are not in the kill radius of anything. The Emirati shipping clerk who processes cargo at Jebel Alipa and the Iranian civil engineer in Isfahan designing water treatment systems share exactly one thing. Neither of them signed up for this, and neither of them can leave. The question this entire story has been building toward is not whether the Verba changes the current war. The current war may be over before a single Verba launcher reaches Iranian soil through official channels. The real question is what the United States does when the next conflict begins in 2 years, in 5 years, and Iran's ground forces and Iran's proxies in 4 countries are holding 2,500 missiles that American aircraft have no reliable answer for. The answer will not be found in the next defense budget, not because the money isn't there. The Pentagon budget exceeds $850 billion annually, but because the solution to a $200 missile is not a $3.9 million interceptor. America has built the most expensive military machine in human history, optimized for dominance at altitude, precision at range, and force projection across oceans. The Verba is not a challenge to American force projection. It is a challenge to the aircraft that make force projection survivable at the tactical level. The helicopters, the close air support planes, the low-altitude surveillance assets. You do not defeat those systems with carrier strike groups. You defeat them by putting a soldier on the ground with a launch tube and a missile that cannot be fooled. Russia handed Iran that soldier's weapon. The Verba deal was a secret. The Su-35 contract for 48 advanced fighter jets, $6.5 billion deliveries through 2027, was initially a secret. The FAT 360 ballistic missile transfers from Thran to Moscow, more than 350 missiles that have already struck targets in Ukraine, were a secret. Every layer of this Russia-Iran military partnership has been a secret until it wasn't, and every time it stopped being a secret. The disclosed version was already smaller than the real one. The interceptor stockpile problem is visible, documented, and being reported. The Verbad deal has been disclosed. The Su-35 transfers are confirmed. What mainstream coverage won't tell you is that these aren't separate stories. They are chapters in a single deliberate strategy being written in Moscow.
One that does not require Iran to win the current war. It only requires Iran to survive it.
Because what comes next after the smoke clears over Thrawn and the press conferences declare victory and the carrier steam home, what comes next is a rebuilt Iran, rearmed by Russia, equipped with systems designed specifically to defeat the military doctrine that America just spent another $3.7 billion, proving it depends on completely. The current war was the preview. What Russia just signed